Getting the length of a given vector is very easy and extremely helpful in many scenarios. And I will now show you a couple of them. Let's start with the obvious, how to get the length of a vector. We have a function for this in MATLAB, and this function is called length. No surprise there. So you use the function length, brackets, and you give it the vector name. So first vector. If I run it, we get the number 8, because we have 8 elements in that vector. If I use it on the smaller vector, small vector, we get 4. This by itself doesn't mean anything, doesn't help us at all, but we will soon see a couple of different applications of the length. Now, before this, the sum of the elements in the vector. We have a function for this as well in MATLAB, it's called sum. It's just as easy as the length, so first vector and some small vector. Let's run it. So the sum in the first vector is 27, 40, 14 in the small vector. Now we are not a long way from the average of all values in the vector. As you probably know, the average of numbers is the sum of the numbers divided by the amount of numbers. In other words, the sum divided by the length. So let's save it in variables. So num of items equals to this. Let's suppress the outputs, sum of items. And finally, we can get average of the first vector with sum of items divided by num of items. And the average between these 8 numbers, the average number is 3.375. Not very hard to do when you have the proper functions for that. Now, finally, I want to show you a way to work with two vectors of different sizes. We have seen this in previous lectures when we talked about the different arithmetic operations, selecting subvectors. We were always giving a specific length, a specific size that we want to work on. And in the case with the arithmetic operators, we weren't able to do anything at all because we can't perform any arithmetic operation on two vectors that are of different size. With the help of the length function, we can overcome this. Let's say that we want to add the first vector and the small vector. If we simply say first vector plus small vector, it's not going to work. But if we say first vector from, now you may say, well, I can just write 1 to 4. Yes, you can, but what if you don't know how long this vector is? If you don't know, you can't say 1 to 4. So what you can do instead is you can say from 1 to length of the small vector. And this let's run it here. This itself will give you the first 4 numbers of the first vector. And you can say addition first vector from 1 to the length of small vector plus small vector. Alright, let's run it. And we get our result. Now, what if we want to do this operation but on a different subvector from the big vector? What if we want to start from the third element? We need to do some calculations here because if we say first vector from 3 to the length of the small vector, we get only 2 items, but in reality we need 4 items. So we need to do some calculations here. In order to do this, we need to shift our end index. To do this, we are going to add 3 to it, plus 3. So we are adding our starting index. Let's see what is this going to give us. It's going to give us 5 elements. Well, it's still not what we wanted. And the final thing, now this is always going to be the case. You are always going to get 1 element more than what you wanted. We are simply going to subtract 1. And if I do this, we get 4 elements. Now, let's put this in action and we are going to extract these calculations here in variables. So I'm going to create my starting index, which is 3, my end index, which is this right here. It's length, small vector, plus 3 minus 1. But we know that the 3 is actually our start index, So I'm going to delete it from here and I'm going to say start index plus the length of the small vector minus 1. So this is our equation for our end index. And now we can simply say first vector from start index to end index equals first vector, again we are selecting the same part, start index and index plus small vector. And if I run this now, if I run this now, we should have our small vector added to the first vector starting from the third element. So 5, 6, 1 and 2 should be added with 3, 4, 5 and 2. Let's run it. And we start from the 5, we have an 8 here, 5 plus 3 is 8, and finally we get 2 plus 2, which is 4. Perfect, exactly what we tried to do. So this is all you need to do when you're doing something like this. You need a start index and you need an end index, which is a bit tricky, but this is the equation for it. Here you simply give it the length of the smaller vector with whatever that vector is. Don't forget to document your code, of course. So length of vectors, sum of vectors, average of a vector, and here we have selecting subvectors based on a vector length. There it is.